makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
There is a new military alliance on the block known as the Australia United Kingdom United States Pact, or AUKUS Pact, or AUKUS Pact, however you want to call it. And this is basically an agreement between the three countries, English-speaking countries, the United States, Britain, and Australia, to act as a kind of counter in the Indo-Pacific region to China, even though they are not openly admitting that that's the purpose of it. But the main characteristic of this pact is actually a technology deal involving the US and the UK in order to provide Australia with the capability to develop and build its first nuclear submarine, a type of weapon that very few countries on Earth possess. So let's look at what is problematic about this deal, because, well, from a purely geopolitical perspective, the problem should be obvious. This is a pact that basically, even though they are adamant about saying that it's not against China, we all know that it is against China. And all this does is basically raise tensions in an area of the world that already has quite heightened tensions between, the new Cold War between China and the US. China has been incredibly aggressive in parts of the Pacific, like the South China Sea, against Taiwan, and the US as well, over the past couple of decades, has pivoted a lot of its naval power into the Pacific, so much that most American naval power is now based on the Pacific, in contrast to the Cold War, where it was mostly based in the Atlantic. So, the risk of a conflict is always there, and pacts like this only make it more likely to happen rather than less likely. However, I don't think, there's a second aspect to this that is probably more important, and that's the commercial aspect. And that is because this agreement to provide, technology transfers for Australia's nuclear submarines comes at the cost of basically throwing the French under the bus, because France, as it turns out, had an agreement to build a dozen conventional submarines for Australia in a deal valued at 50 billion Australian dollars, which is about 40 billion US dollars, something like nearly 30 billion pounds. So the French are not happy. They canceled a gala, I think, that was scheduled. I think it was today or sometime this week, a gala in Washington, D.C., which was to commemorate the Battle of the Chesapeake Bay, which most Americans were never told in their history textbooks, that the French actually defeated the Royal Navy in the Chesapeake Bay shortly before the Battle of Yorktown. And this allowed, this denied the ability of the British to effectively resupply its troops on the ground. And this eventually led to the Franco-American army because the French were actually half the army that won the Battle of Yorktown. That's right, Americans. You owe it to France. You owe your independence to France. I know this might hurt. But anyway, these are the comments of the French. It's really a stab in the back, said France's Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian. The minister said that Paris had been taken by surprise, as the agreement had not been mentioned in recent discussions with the US about Indo-Pacific policy. We had been discussing that with the US just recently, and here comes this break, Le Drian said, calling it a huge breach of trust. Senior EU officials have also complained that they had not been consulted. And, well, the US and Britain have tried to play this down. For example, Ben Wallace, the new, I should add, UK Defense Secretary. No, he's not new. Sorry, there was a cabinet reshuffle. I'm not quite sure if he's new. Anyway, said on Thursday that he understood France's disappointment about the loss of a lucrative export deal, but argued it was driven by an Australian change in its capability requirement, at least initially. Now, this seems like a BS argument, and the reason is, if you make a deal of that magnitude, 50 billion Australian dollars, then you kind of expect that if your operational requirements change, then you will discuss this with your business partner. And if Australia had decided that it wanted to build nuclear submarines instead of conventional submarines, well, they could have agreed with the French. Because the French already have a very similar pact with another country, Brazil, who they are helping develop Brazil's first indigenous nuclear-powered submarine. And this deal with Brazil started with conventional submarines. So Brazil is currently building a class of conventional submarines based on the French Scorpion class. And, from that, the next step was to build a nuclear submarine. So Australia could have probably managed something similar, but the US and the UK had other plans. And yeah, this is really, really dodgy. I think France has every right to feel that it got incredibly shafted. And I think that, well, the reason why I think this deal is primarily commercially motivated to throw the French under the bus, rather than really a geopolitical pact with any meaningful impact, is because I don't think it will have much impact in terms of changing the balance of power in the Pacific in favor of these Western countries. And I'll explain. We're gonna talk a bit about nuclear submarines. And I should add, this is a topic of incredible interest, anything related to military technology and defense policy. And I actually work on the side with the International Institute of Strategic Studies. So this is a topic of somewhat expertise on my part. Nuclear submarines, as I mentioned earlier, are an incredibly technologically advanced and expensive weapon. And only a small number of countries, basically 6 countries, and if we remove India's sole nuclear missile sub, which actually is a Russian leased nuclear sub, then that only leaves 5. And China, the UK, and France only have a dozen, and it's really the US and Russia that are the only 2 main nuclear submarine powers. China has a pretty big submarine fleet, but most of the other ones are conventionally powered. Whereas Russia also has a large fleet of conventional powered subs. The US, UK, and France are exclusively nuclear. Now, there's 2 types of nuclear subs. There is the nuclear powered ballistic missile submarines. So those are the ones that actually shoot nuclear missiles. When you say nuclear submarine, the nuclear refers to how they're powered, not what weapons they have. So nuclear powered ballistic missile subs are the ones that actually shoot nuclear ballistic missiles. And they are by far the single most terrifying weapon ever developed in the history of mankind. Because just one of these subs can carry usually from a dozen to 2 dozen ballistic missiles, each of which has up to 10 warheads. So do the math. We're talking at over 100 cities that could be basically wiped out by just one of these subs, which can be hiding anywhere in the world. You don't know where it is. So that's what's absolutely terrifying about these weapons. But those are not the ones that Australia is going to build. Australia is going to build a nuclear-powered attack submarine. These are submarines that are designed to attack other submarines or attack ships, or increasingly attack land targets with cruise missiles. So those are the submarines that Australia is going to build. They are not as expensive, and yeah, they don't involve having nuclear weapons, which by signing the Non-Proliferation Treaty, Australia would not be allowed to have anyway. So here's a nice little chart of some of the main types of submarines. So the top one is the US's Virginia class. That's their standard attack sub, nuclear attack sub, and that's pretty much like the standard size of a nuclear attack sub. Then you have the Ohio class, which is the ballistic missile sub. So they're much bigger, much bigger. A lot of them have like a noticeable hump, which is to give more space for the ballistic missiles to be fitted in as silos. And then we have the Kilo class is a Russian conventional sub, a diesel sub. Their conventional submarines are usually diesel powered, so they also call them diesel subs. And that's the standard size, more or less, of a diesel sub, much smaller. Same with the Type 039A, which is a Chinese diesel sub. And then you have the Yasen class, which is kind of an attack sub cruise missile platform hybrid. But the closest equivalent here would be the Virginia class sub. Now, nuclear submarines have a major advantage over diesel subs, and that is because they are nuclear powered, they can basically undertake very long patrols. Usually, anything from 3 up to 4 or 5 months, they can be on patrol at sea. And that gives them an amazing power projection capability. Anywhere in the world, they could be, shadowing enemy ships without being detected. So yeah, in terms of power projection, nuclear submarines are without peer in terms of naval power. Diesel subs obviously can't do that. They generally stay closer to the coastlines. They can wander off, but they can't stay there as long as a nuclear sub. But diesel subs have a very big advantage over nuclear subs, and that is that they are quieter. That is because the way that a diesel sub works is that they have a diesel-powered engine which charges an electrical battery. And the electrical battery allows the submarine to run without any of the machinery of the diesel engine to be running. So basically, the machinery shuts down, it runs on the battery, and it's incredibly silent. So if you have a diesel sub that's just loitering there, waiting to detect any passing ships, it is almost impossible to detect. That's how quiet they are. Whereas a nuclear sub, the nuclear power plant will always be running. There will always be some machine noise coming out of it, even though the latest generation of subs are also incredibly quiet. But still, that is an advantage that diesel subs have. And obviously, diesel engines are much cheaper than nuclear engines, so they will be considerably cheaper. And the reason I say this is because that is at the root of Australia's problem with this plan, which is looking at this chart and considering, for the moment, let's just look at the sort of mid-tier powers. The UK and France both have between 4 and 6 nuclear attack subs. Now, Australia is a country that is smaller than either in terms of the size of their economy. So you have an economy that is less than half the size of the UK's and France's. So how many submarines are they going to realistically be able to build? 2 or 3? Let's be generous. 3 subs, of which one will probably be in refit at any given point, which means they'll only have 2 subs out there patrolling at any time. Does that really sound like a game-changing projection of military power in the Pacific? I don't. I don't think this changes the balance of power in any meaningful way. China's going to be building many, many more nuclear submarines much, much quicker. So any 2 that are added to this number is immediately going to be swamped by the amount of submarines that China is going to be able to build. And even then, right now, as it is, so China is building up its navy at a speed that is unprecedented in recent history. A lot of their ships are incredibly advanced, but in terms of submarines, they're still a bit behind. So they're still a bit behind the Russians, and they're way behind the latest generation of US and British subs, which are usually considered the best in the world. The French are catching up, but it's usually the US and the UK that have the best submarines in the world. So China's still a bit behind technologically in terms of how quiet they are, their detection capability, things like that. So they're really, the balance of power really is already pretty skewed in favor of the West, just in terms of submarines. So what's the point of these two additional subs? It just doesn't add up, which makes me think that the primary reason for this deal is not really the geopolitical aspect of it. I think the reason is commercial. And I think the reason is, well, now that the war in Afghanistan is over, there's a lot of US and British defense contractors that will see reduced profits in the next couple of years. And, what better way to compensate them from this withdrawal than by, muscling the French out of a very lucrative submarine deal and handing over those contracts to American and British defense companies. That is, I think, the root of the issue. I think that is the reason why this pact exists, not because it has any meaningful strategic relevance, which I don't think it does, because I don't think Australia is really ever going to be a major player in the ultimate balance of power between the US and China in the Pacific. I just don't think it's going to be. So, yeah, that is my theory. And, well, if you like this video, I really like talking about defense issues. I don't know if that is something that my subscribers want me to talk more about. This was not really the intention of this channel, but if you want to, write in the comments. I'll be happy to do more defense-related videos. And do yourself a favor and go rewatch or watch, if you haven't seen it, The Hunt for Red October, because it's the best submarine movie out there. Really good. I might just watch it right now, because now I'm in the mood. So yeah, if you like this video, please like, please share. Most importantly, please subscribe. This is the first video where we hit 400 subscribers, so I'm very happy. And it's on Mexican Independence Day, so 2 reasons to celebrate. I should have brought a tequila shot, but I don't. Anyway, see you next time.